Hey, what's going on out there? I'm Sean Devine, just checking on the chat. If you guys can hear me okay right now, let me know. Give me a thumbs up here. Got the chat open. Got a mastering feedback session. We're about to get right into it, but just want to let everybody get in here. And yeah, excited to be with y'all. ADSR going to be focusing on mastering feedback. So if you can hear me all right, give me a thumbs up.
Ooh, there's only one way.
All right, we got a yes. Awesome. What's up, Ian? Trackformers. Hey, what's up, Harsh? All right, awesome. So the chat is live. I'm really excited to be with you all today. If you're not familiar with me, I'm Sean Devine. I'm a music producer, mixing and mastering engineer, sound designer. Wear a lot of different hats in the studio. But today, again, excited to be with y'all here streaming with ADSR. And we're going to be focusing on mastering. So there's a lot of misconceptions about mastering, and I think that we're going to tackle quite a few of them. But I want to answer some questions and go through some submissions. These are tracks that were submitted through the ADSR Discord community. So if you didn't get a chance to submit this time, there will be an opportunity to do that. Again, go check out their server so you can make sure and take advantage of when we're going to be airing in the future. If you're not familiar with ADSR, very quickly, they are a one-stop shop for tutorials, samples, loops, synth presets, software courses, all the stuff for music producers and sound designers. So be sure to check them out. But before we dive in here, yeah, checking out the chat. This is, by the way, this is like my first official stream. So very excited to do this with you all. Hey, what's up, Rashane? Trackformers. Smoking Igloo. Hey, that's awesome, man. Awesome. All right, so before we dive in here, I want to let you guys know, let's go ahead and switch over to the screen cap here. And I've got these submissions that were sent in from Discord. These are finished masters. So I just want to be clear that what was sent to me, I believe, were the tracks that are going to be sent off for, final release. And so I'm excited to be able to provide some feedback here. And we're going to discuss what was done well, maybe some things that could be improved upon, and also just thoughts and concepts and techniques that are going to be hopefully helpful for you all in your future masters, no matter what genre, no matter what style. This is not genre specific whatsoever. But I do want to preface here that, this is a feedback session. So not only am I going to be providing feedback, but I am really asking for you all's help in the chat. I would love for you all to be active in providing your feedback, because that's going to be very valuable for these folks who did submit their masters. And we're all here to learn, right? So also just be respectful. It takes a lot of courage just to submit your track for this type of critique and feedback. So if you're going to give people criticism, just make sure you follow it up with something like, hey, here's what you could do better, and here's maybe how to do it, rather than just this stinks or whatever, right? So we're all here to encourage, and let's have fun with it. This is supposed to be fun, right? So I'm very, very excited again to be with you all. And if we have some time at the end, depending on how we get through the tracks, I may just master a track from scratch and just apply a lot of the things that we talked about. So if you are into that, might happen. Stay tuned, following the feedback session. But also, if you have any questions about mastering or anything related to what I'm covering throughout the stream as we're talking about it, just leave it in the chat. I've got that open, happy to, just jump in there and let you guys know what's up. Hey, definitely not neglecting. I see you, Trackformers. I see you. Yeah, that's right. No. I'm definitely not here to to be super critical or anything. I want to just try to help you guys. So let's dive into it. Before I press play, my feedback, and you guys can go wherever you want with it, is going to be based on tone, dynamics, and loudness, right? So those are kind of the three core things in mastering that we're going to be focusing on. Mastering can go a lot of different directions, but that's where we're going to be today, at least in terms of what I'm focusing on. So first track, DJ No, and this is called One-Sided World. Here we go.
Ooh, there's only one way I know how to be. In my one-sided world, I can always be me. I can be a simple woman with complex things going into my head. When I think I figured out, I learned something that changes who I'm about. There's only one way I know how to be. In my one-sided world, I can only be me. There's only one way I know how to be. In my one-sided world, I can only be me. I will not accept no. The rules of your game, where women hurt with shallow words, filled with shame. Then we could be warmer and warmer. The cold wind settles in, that causes an indiscretion over me, over me, over me, over me.
Okay, I'm going to stop it right now, even though I didn't want to, because that guitar solo was coming in. It sounded pretty cool. My feedback here is, number one, song is great. Love the message. Really, really cool track. Great vocal performance. So we're talking again about tone, dynamics, loudness. Starting with tone, overall, very good. A couple of issues that I was hearing above 500. Everything above 500 for me sounds pretty fantastic. Everything below that is where the problems are lying for me. And we're going to talk about a couple of different things here. But number one, I'm noticing the loudness of this track at -6 LUFS integrated, which if you guys aren't familiar with LUFS, there's some content on ADSR as well as my channel on YouTube that covers this in depth. But -6 is quite loud. Nothing wrong with that necessarily, but I think that that's going to relate to the issues that I have here. And really the low end for me, the bass line sounds fantastic, but I just couldn't get the kick. The kick was just not cutting through. And my assumption is that you were pushing the limiter, maybe a multi-band compressor, to really get that loudness. But as a result, the kick just didn't have the definition. I could barely hear that kick coming through. So that's my main sort of feedback there. Like if we play it back, hang on, let's take a look at the analyzer here.
I can only be me. Again, where we're met, when settles in, that causes.
So if we take a look at that, a lot of the core energy of the kick drum is at like 30 hertz, which, as you guys know, great frequency in terms of, the feeling, but we're just not getting a lot of that punch out of the kick drum. So, and I assume that's because your bass line is lying, more up in this upper sort of end here, but we've still got to get that punch. And so I think that would be related to just bringing back the overall loudness. Don't push that limiter or that multiband compression or compressor, whatever you're using there, as hard. You'd much rather sacrifice a little bit of loudness for more dynamics, for more definition in the low end. I just would love to hear more of that kick drum. But that's my low end sort of feedback there. The track is great for sure. I love this track. Yeah, what are you guys hearing? Yeah, it's very, very loud, says Brian. And again, we'll talk more about loudness, not just loudness in terms of volume, but in terms of perceived loudness. That's what I really would like to dive into more in this session. So stay tuned. We're going to continue to dive into that. But let's just say that this came to me and we had, some of these issues. So number one, we talked about, everything above 500 being pretty good, but from about 250 to 500, we also had some issues with the vocal. So I want you guys to just look at some of the buildup between about 500 to 800. I just want to see what that looks like.
When settles in, that causes an indiscretion over me. When settles in, that causes an indiscretion.
So that's some of the loudest elements in the master, right? And again, I don't want to take away from the performance. So when we're talking about mastering and it comes to me in this form, I'm not trying to, mess with the performance. I don't want to take away from that, but we do need a little bit of control since it's pushed pretty hard. So what I'm going to do is use a dynamic EQ. I'm sure you guys are familiar. It's much more popular to use a multiband compressor a lot of times, but I've just found that dynamic EQ tends to be a lot more transparent, especially in mastering. So let's just solo this and kind of dial in the problematic area. Okay, so somewhere in there, and then if we go down to Pro EQ, and we're just going to, you see this outer circle as we go over here. If you guys are familiar with this plugin, we get a dynamic range control. So if we just bring this back a little bit, we're just going to dial in a bit of taming here.
When settles in, that causes an indiscretion over me, over me.
So just in the loudest parts of the performance. And again, this is something that if it comes to me, I would love to just contact my, mixing engineer from the client and say, hey, let's dial this in a little bit. But sometimes you just don't have that luxury as a mastering engineer. So dynamic EQ is going to give you a bit more control there. Another thing to notice, you guys who are real sticklers about clipping, just realize that we've got mastered tracks. So I have no headroom. So you might see that throughout this. But yeah, that's the main things I would do there. And then with the low end, again, if I didn't have a choice, I would select some type of transient processing just to kind of get that kick going. But yeah, what do you guys think in the chat? Going over here. Yeah, it's a great track, great vibe. Yeah, so I mean, something you could do if you wanted to fix that, and again, this is if you were dealing with a master with some headroom, but you could use a plugin like maybe this TransX Multi, and there's multi-band transient tools out here if we wanted to try to bring up that kick a little bit, but I would just dial this in towards like 120 or so, and let's see, I'm going to turn up the sensitivity.
When settles in, discretion over me, over me, over me, over me. Out in a paradise forever and forever.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, I'm pushing this and we're clipping quite a bit, but just to give you guys an idea, with zero headroom, we could try to doctor that, or I could just reach out to the mixing engineer and say, hey, let's turn up the kick a little bit and bring down the limiter, the processing there, to give us a little bit more room. So just some thoughts on that one, but great track, DJ No. Really enjoyed that, and I think you're like 95% there, which is another thing that I just want to reiterate with mastering. A lot of times, you know, we feel like this is supposed to be some kind of crazy, like, scientific process that, you know, only mastering engineers who have been doing this for 40 or 50 years in these $1 million studios can accomplish. And that's just not the case, especially not these days. You know, the plugins, the things that we have at our disposal, you guys can definitely master and do it well. So I would just, you know, don't feel like this is something that's out of your realm of doing. So, yeah, going back here, we're going to jump into the next one. Before I do that, again, just want to reiterate that if you want to submit tracks for feedback and be part of a great producer community, engineer community, join the ADSR Discord. I just checked it out. I'm kind of new to the Discord stuff, and I thought it was really, really cool. There's tons of information on there. So links will be in the chat as well as the description if you guys want to jump into it. But the next one we got here, Brian G. And while I'm playing that, I would love to hear you guys' ideas here. How can these folks make their masters better from what you all are hearing? Again, I'm here to provide feedback, but let's give them as much valuable feedback and try to help them as much as possible. So this is Brian G. Szechuan Sauce. All right, I'm going to stop right there. I was kind of vibing to that one too. We got some good tracks here. Hey, that's Brian G. Session One Sauce. And so the reason why I pulled up the WLM Plus, which is this is one of my favorite loudness meters. It's very accurate. But I was just looking because, given the style and the genre, I know again we're not talking genre specific in this feedback session, but for this type of song, being that it is a dance and EDM track, I just felt like it was a bit quiet in terms of overall loudness. So I think this would probably be a good segue to talk about LUFS in terms of just streaming platforms, the modern sort of world we're in terms of where do we deliver. So there's a lot of common misconceptions out here that everything should be delivered at minus 14 LUFS because that's the quote standard with Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, whatever. They all are a little bit different, but generally speaking, we're at minus 14, minus 15, right? So there's a lot of people who feel like that's where they should deliver, but at least at this point, that's not the standard. So again, I'm sure most of you know that, but I just want to reiterate that the minus 14 is actually designed to create consistency for listeners. It's not a standard of what you should deliver it. So, and Brian, I know you're at minus 11, so you weren't there, but I just want to get that out of the way before we start talking about loudness, because I know a lot of people will say, we're supposed to deliver it at minus 14, right? Again, if you have like sound check, loudness normalization, all that stuff checked in your specific client like Spotify or Apple Music or whatever you use, then it's just going to play everything back with that integrated LUFS reading, right? That's it. So 99%, let's say maybe 95 of top 40 international is not delivered anywhere close to that. It's usually more between minus 8, minus 11, somewhere in there. All that to say, for dance and EDM, a lot of the tracks that I hear, they're pushing the LUFS quite loud. So Brian, being here at minus 11, if those normalization options are not checked for the listener, it's going to be a lot quieter than a Dead Mouse or whoever in this sort of genre. They're pushing things a lot louder. So if you were going to a physical medium, something like that, it's just not really going to compete in that way. That's the first thing I notice. So again, talking about tone, dynamics, loudness, that's loudness. Dynamics were excellent. Like everything was very punchy, kick drum very punchy, and the tone was also on point. So the main thing, again, for me was just the loudness being at minus 11 for that type of track. I think we could push it more. What do you guys think? Yeah, so, different plugins kind of measure slightly different. Like I've noticed if I pulled up the multimeter, so that says minus 12, but I don't think I reset it from when we were playing One Sided World. But anyway, they're slightly different, but for the most part, they're pretty consistent. Yes, there's so many different tracks in here, and it's exciting. Like I was listening to these before I jumped on, and I love it. I love the diversity. It's amazing. Yeah, Brian, I would push more towards, to be safe, minus 9, minus 10. But it kind of goes back to what we were talking about with the One Sided World track, which is at minus 6. If it's at the expense to get it that loud that you lose the dynamics, then I would say don't do that. But it's this kind of really fine balance in mastering where it's like we want to get it as loud as possible, but that's not the end of the conversation. That's kind of become the most important thing. Everybody's focused on it's just got to be the loudest track, and my stuff's got to come on and really stand out. But the art of it is get the track as loud as it can be, but maintain the dynamics, maintain the definition in your low end, maintain, all that stuff. So that comes with experience, but also, just use your ears. And if you start pushing your limiter, which we're going to talk more about that, hopefully here in a little bit, but, just don't push it to the point that you're sacrificing the dynamic range, Yeah. Yes, the loudness wars are alive and very well, Mix Warp. But we don't play those games, Loudness is cool, but dynamics are just as cool. So we go for both. All right, so moving on. Before I move on, we got a quick announcement. Next week, ADSR is doing a Get a Better Mix session with Jane Arneson. She is a producer and mix engineer. So subscribe, stay notified if you guys want to get some tracks in for that. We're going to be doing a lot more of these so you guys can get some feedback. All right, next track. What do we have here? This is Copacetic Kid, Springtime Bop. And I want to see some of you guys' feedback in the chat while I'm playing this, because I want to know what you guys are hearing. Hey, Springtime Bop, Copacetic Kid. I really like that. That has got a nice, smooth vibe to it. Love the electric piano. This may be a little bit of a mix thing. I told myself that I would not dive into that because, again, Jane's going to really cover that for you guys. But I think that it's taking up quite a bit of room in the mix, and I don't know if the final sort of release for this is just as a beat, or if you had any intention of, like an MC coming on it or a songwriter. I could definitely hear somebody writing something over that. It's just eating quite a bit of that space that would be used for a vocal. So I think it would be cool to, maybe utilize some side chaining with the kick drum, specifically with that electric piano. Just, creatively thinking about it, I think that would be a stylistic and also just a smart choice in terms of the master, just getting something that's really dynamic and interesting in that way. The other thing that I'm noticing is just that there's not a whole lot going on in terms of stereo. So it's pretty monocentric, which is fine for beats, again, if you're, kind of pitching them for an artist to be on. But just to make it more interesting, we might want to sort of excite that, which I'm going to show you guys some easy ways to do that. But if we just mono that out, got some cool stereo stuff when the brass comes in. Yeah, like that brass has a really cool image to it. And I think we could excite that. So in your mastering chain, something as simple as, you know, we could use like the Ozone Imager, or even something really simple as a plugin. This is from Matthew Lane. It's called Stereo Delta, and it's just one knob, right? This is mono, fold all the way to mono. And then if we go up here, we start introducing a lot of different kind of exciting imaging things. So let's start there and we'll just dial it in, see what works. So as I go all the way over, it's a little bit much, right? But yeah, I mean, as soon as I turn it on, it's just like, something subtle, but it makes it that much more pleasing to me. And this is a really cool beat, by the way. I love the vibe. Great work, Copacetic Kid. But yeah, again, that's a very subtle thing. I know a lot of you are looking at it and going, mastering, I'm going to put on a one knob plugin. But these are the types of things where, when we start creating these very subtle additions over a mastering chain, and I'm just doing these, again, on already mastered stuff. But if we had this mastering chain that we're building up and we throw that plugin in on our mastering chain, it's going to make that much more of a difference. By the time we get to the end of it, doing some of these subtle dynamic EQ cuts and getting the loudness dialed in, it really creates, just a much more complete professional master. So yeah, go into the chat. What's up, Penny Stacks? So this was Rashane? Good work, Rashane. I dig that. Yeah, for sure. All right, so let's keep it moving here. We're gonna go to maybe one more of these, and we might try to do like a really abbreviated speed master on a mix. If you guys are into that, we'll see. Let's see how much we can get through here. So this is bulk modulus -1. That might be some of the craziest sounds I've heard in a while, man. That's very creative stuff here. Let me go back to a part here I heard. Okay. And this is one of those mastering things that you just start to pick up on, again, with experience. But a lot of times I'll have, mix clients send me mixes where it's tough to pick out, but you can hear phase issues. And I'm going to show you guys a way to pick up on that a little bit easier But just in listening to it, I could just hear this piano. I don't know if you guys heard it, but there's a piano that I think we'll test. We'll check. But I think there's a bit of a phasing issue here. Okay, so the piano there. Let me go ahead and I'm going to pull up a couple of different things that we can look at. One would be the paths analyzer so we can monitor phase. Let me put that over here so you guys can see it. And I also just want to pull up a mono plugin. So you guys have seen me pull up this gain plugin, just kind of monitoring mono. And once again, this is more a mixing thing. I'm sure Jane will probably cover some of this, but like mixing in mono is, as a reference, is very useful. I would not recommend, mixing completely in mono because, hey, we live in a stereo world and we're actually going beyond that in a lot of the technologies that are here. So you might as well utilize them, but it's very useful to reference in mono to, kind of identify some different issues. So if we hit mono, I want you to listen for that piano. I'm going to turn that on and off, and let's just hear what's happening. So when I turn it into mono, it's very hard to hear that piano. So that tells me, okay, there's definitely a phase relationship issue. But if you're not familiar, if you haven't quite picked up on that, you can use something like this phase meter here, monitor the anti-phase. So let's just turn that on and see what that tells us. Let me reset this. Yeah, so we've got a lot of anti-phase there, and that's going to identify, at least give you something that you can have as an indicator to say, okay, there's a bit of a problem here. So again, when you come down to the mastering chain, very important thing just to monitor your phase relationship. You can use something like the paths analyzer. I actually have a Clarity M, which is, it's like a hardware sort of thing, and I can go into a vector scope and just really kind of see what the imaging looks like there. But you definitely don't want to lose things when you go into mono. That's really the most important thing when you're mastering, is just flick it in. And if things get significantly quieter or you lose it completely, which that happens a lot. If you have a complete phase cancellation, big issue in mastering, right? So just some simple things that you want to make sure and be aware of there. Any questions about what we've talked about thus far? Taking a look at the chat here. Hey, what's up, Kaiser? Yeah. Yeah, no problem, Rasheen. Cool. I think we've got, let's see, we've got one more submission. No, excuse me, we got two. So let's see how many we can get through here. I'm going to go over here, and this is Path of Ascension from Genesis Free. Yeah, so real quick, we had a question, how to fix that issue if you have a phase relationship. Unfortunately, once we get to mastering, there's not a ton we can do about it. I mean, we can narrow the stereo field. We can use what's called mid-side processing on certain things, that might help. But the best case scenario is usually to go back into the mixing. We would pull up that piano and see, maybe if there was the way it was panned, and maybe the reverb that was being used was causing something, or it may have been in the actual recording process. So at that point, you can do things like experiment with flipping the phase. You guys have heard some of these practices, but once we get to mastering, if you have individual elements that are out of phase, that's really something where a lot of times I have to just call the mixing engineer and be like, hey, we got a problem here. Can we, identify that on a stem level and fix it there? That's much more easy. So there is kind of some science that you can do in the mastering process, but again, it's much, much easier, much more effective to do that once we get to mastering. So yeah, so we got a question about, so everybody's staying home and releasing mainly on SoundCloud, YouTube, Spotify. Does it make things different? All the books were kind of written before Spotify became a big thing. Yes and no. I think that you've got to be concerned about competing loudness-wise, which the thing that's actually good about, all this loudness normalization is that you have to focus more on perceived loudness, not just loudness. Because again, most people, when they're listening on Spotify and all these other platforms, they have the normalization on. So that means you can't get kind of this unfair sort of jump just by having a louder track. But you can do things with perceived loudness, which again, I'm hoping we're going to have time to get to some things I'm going to show you on just mastering from scratch to get perceived loudness that even when playing back at the same, minus 14 LUFS, you can still shine, So I think it's good in that way. But as far as just where you're delivering it at, it really hasn't changed things as much as I feel like some people have kind of thought, given this streaming sort of standard that's designed for listeners. It's not really designed for us as engineers and how we're delivering, at least not at this point. I don't know if that will change. Maybe all the platforms at some point say, you know what? It has to be delivered at minus 10 LUFS integrated, and everybody's got to stick to that, or else we're going to, put a limiter on it. I don't know. But right now, it doesn't really change how you deliver things, for sure. Preventing phase issues, definitely comes down to, number one, the recording. So when you first start capturing things, you want to make sure that, if you're in a live environment, it's a little bit different because you have different mics set up. So you want to make sure that you don't have, phase issues there. But as far as with what we do, like in the DAW, a lot of you guys are doing electronic stuff. It's more about just referencing in mono. So like just flicking into mono like we did, just pull up a gain plugin and, just turn on mono. And if it gets significantly quieter or it disappears, meaning you have a serious phase cancellation, those are the main things to really look out for. But you shouldn't have to worry about it too much. Again, just use your ears as long as it's not posing a problem in that way. Yeah, so wait, I wanted to dive back into Genesis Free. Let's take a listen here. I think we got some vocals in here.
Well, the golden chariot carried me there.
Take the great path of ascension.
I heard the call and I heeded it. Ascension keys collected and stories in full. Attain your light body and infinitely grow.
All right, so this one actually is a pretty common thing. Cool vibe. Love those drums too. But there's a lot of mixes that come to me that are very sibilant, very harsh, and it's tough to, kind of say that I can fix all of the sibilance at the mastering stage, but it's surprisingly effective with certain tools. I mean, dynamic EQ would be one of them, like we looked at earlier. Let's see. Sometimes you can just put a de-esser that's very, very subtle on the master, and just see how it kind of interacts. Now, I wouldn't recommend this in all cases because, again, certain tracks it's going to take away from other elements in your master, so it may or may not be effective. But it's something to try, especially if you can use it subtly.
The Tao. Call in I body and infinitely grow. They all began to chant and sing, removing my ability to think. As I knelt down and
So yeah, I mean, you can hear right there.
infinitely grow. They all began to chant and sing, removing my ability to think.
Yeah, so we play that back now.
They all began to chant and sing, removing my ability to think.
So yeah, that Waves de-esser is surprisingly accurate at picking it up, even on a 2-track, on a master. So you can try that. There's some other plugins that may be a good idea as well. There's a plugin called, let me see if I can find it. Yeah, I use this a lot, if I get something for mastering that I really need to tame. It's called Soothe 2. You guys have probably heard of it. But usually you can just pull it up and make some adjustments just on the factory preset here. Let me see.
Ascension keys collected in stories in full. Attain your light body and infinitely grow. They all began to chant and sing.
So yeah, that one's more of a dynamic thing. Again, we could use a dynamic EQ like we looked at earlier in the stream, but just a couple of ways, like if you get a mix that otherwise is great, but you've just got a sibilant vocal, luckily, in my experience, that's something you can still fix in the mastering stage if it's not too crazy, But yeah, I think that that's what I would look at there. Otherwise, cool vibe, very different, very unique. I have not gotten too much into Golfos. I do have it, and I think it's a cool plugin. I haven't really dove into it all that much. Yeah. So there's certain ones that have more of kind of an intelligent way of processing things, different plugins. Soothe would be one of them. But, just use your ears. Some of them are going to work better than others, but you're still going to have to make some adjustments. Even when I pull up, something like that, a very effective preset on there, you want to make it, very applicable to the specific song. So, all right. So we got one more track here. Unless we got a couple more questions. Yes, a phase correlation meter is very effective, for sure. Would definitely, just like with the multimeter, we've got one actually here. So if we go over, let's just play this other track here. You can monitor phase correlation, with a lot of the stock plugins. This is in Logic, but any DAW is going to have that. But just keeping an eye on that consistently, making sure nothing goes too crazy, that's going to really help you with identifying phase issues. So what do we've got, we got a little bit of time here. Do any of you have specific questions about what we've been through so far? I might try to do just like a speed master. If you guys are into that, you guys want to see me try to master something very, very quickly, and then we can talk about it. We'll apply a lot of the things that we just talked about. Let's see if we've got time for it. All right, I tell you what, we're going to do it. So I'm going to go over here. Let's see here. All right. So this is a mix. I'm just going to play this back real quick. This is just a track that I put together, and then we're going to master it from scratch. And Gamma Day, Gimme Gimme. I had one more submission. Hang on, let's go through that real quick. Like that bass line, Gamma Day. That's really cool. Cool vibe there. What I'm hearing just initially is that you've got some buildup below, like 20. And just given the bass line and the kick, I would probably just roll off quite a bit, which we're going to talk about here. This is a very simple thing that's often overlooked is, just rolling off extreme lows for your masters. It gets a little bit sticky because over the years, I've seen different engineers and different people say, well, roll off everything below 50 or 40. Obviously, this day and age, especially with the kind of music we're working with, that's not really a good idea. We're not mastering typically for vinyl or anything like that, so I wouldn't go that high. But, 25 and below, if there's a lot of information down there, it's really helpful to just get rid of it, right? So I would probably just put on that high pass filter, roll it off below 25. Like for instance, I don't know if, you guys are on like headphones or monitors right now, but I'll just play 20 hertz for you. Like if we just open this up. All right, that's 20, right? Down to 30. So I highly doubt that many of you heard anything below 30. So you might as well get rid of the room so that when we get into, the limiting, we're going to have more headroom to work with. So I would just roll that off at about 25, get rid of some of that. And even for this track, if you want to go a little higher just to clean that up, that's the main thing I'm hearing there. Also, the vocals, there's a little bit of harshness at 1K to 2K. And, we could do the dynamic EQ to just kind of dial that in. Let me do that real quick. Oops, not dual mono. We want to go stereo. Yeah, so right there, just given that you've added quite a bit of reverb, it does get a bit harsh. So I would just dial in a dynamic EQ. Again, some people like to elect to do multi-band compression. I think multi-band compression works much better in the mixing stage versus the mastering stage. That's just my experience. This is much more transparent. Yeah, so it just sounds much more controlled as soon as we dial in that band with the dynamic EQ. All right, so very quickly, we're going to try and just jump in here and master this mix. This is a song that I produced and put together. But yeah, let's see what we can do with a quick master, applying a lot of the things we talked about. How many of you guys are still with me? You still with me? You still having fun? If you're still here and you want to see us master a mix from scratch, let me know and we'll keep it going. If not, we'll save this for the next one, right? What's up, Penny Stacks? Yes, there was lots of sauce on those vocals. Great tracks, by the way. Everybody that submitted, I was really just impressed with the diversity and just a lot of unique stuff in there. That was really fun just to go through and listen to that. So y'all keep it up. And a lot of the stuff that we talked about, you can see it was just very subtle. You know, it wasn't anything like there was no tremendously major issues. And that's the great thing about mastering is when you get a mix that's done properly, the 95% of the work is done in the mix, and then the mastering is more just use your ears and say, okay, what do I need to do to make this, even if it's like a little bit better, you know, that's it. It doesn't have to be this really insane process of doing it. All right, here we go. So I'm going to play the mix for a minute, and then we're going to really dive in. We'll try to do this in an efficient manner. All right, here we go. This is the mix, by the way. Nothing happening here. It's going to be kind of quiet. Lately I've been questioning it all. How many stick around when you fall? This is not a game out here. People chasing money and the fame out here. Stack it up, but what's it mean? Tensions upside down, obscene. Sell you empty dreams for a fee. Deep down, we got the faith, don't leave. All right, here we go. We're going to make it slap, Penny. I promise. So, first things first, I'm going to go ahead and let's see here. I think we need to go ahead and do deductive EQ. So we talked about this just a minute ago. We're getting rid of a lot of low end. This has got a lot of stuff happening below, you know, like 30 hertz. It can get a little muddy. So I'm going to open up the linear phase EQ. How many of you guys are familiar with linear phase? Have you ever opened up your linear phase EQ? I'm curious. Well, anyway, real quickly, linear phase just tends to be more precise than a typical EQ. So I'm going to use that. We're just going to roll off probably at about 25 or so. Get rid of some stuff here. Let's go over to the... I only pray when convenient. How could I be so conceited? Trust when you let me wrong, knowing that I find my way back home. You know the show must go on. All right, so about 25, we're gonna get rid of that. And then let's go ahead and do a dynamic EQ. So when we're approaching mastering, we want to look at it like, let's get rid of all the stuff that is causing a problem, or let's, you know, EQ and do all these dynamic EQs to get rid of that stuff first, because we don't necessarily want to be overwhelming the rest of our processing, whether it be multiband compression or whatever, the limiter, we want to get rid of that stuff first. So I'm going to go ahead and just set something that's going to control the extreme low end, because again, there's just a lot going on down here.
Knowing that I'll find my way back home. You know the show must go on. Endure the eye of a storm. When I feel weak at my worst, your love is the first.
All right, so we're getting like, maybe 2 dB of deduction down there. Just want to make sure that that's controlled. Now the snare drum, I know you guys probably had to turn your headphones up a little bit. We're going to get to the loudness here, but we got to get the tone. Remember, we're talking about what? Tone, dynamics, and loudness, right? So we're going to get to the loudness, but right now we got to fix the tone and the dynamics. So the snare to me is popping out a little bit.
Faith don't leave, 'cause that's priceless. I confide it, uninvited. At times, clouded mind, cold hearts, feeling lost, but you had me from the start. Oh yeah, I cannot live for myself.
So you can just hear that poking out a little bit. So let's dial that back.
Faith don't leave, 'cause that's priceless. I confide it, uninvited. At times, clouded mind, cold hearts, feeling lost, but you had me from the start. Oh yeah, I cannot live for myself. Traveling alone, no help.
Very subtle control, but what we've just done with that dynamic EQ as well as the linear phase is, again, we've just controlled all that stuff that we don't want, coming into the rest of our processing. So now let's get into something fun. We're going to set up a parallel comp. And so I'm just going to go ahead and send this to the bus comp. I've got something set up here. We're going to mix this in subtly, but I also want to make sure that this is set to pre-fader. All right, so we just want to send that down as pre-fader. And I'm going to open up, let's see, what's my favorite bus comp? I got a couple of different favorites, but let me just see if we could do maybe the SSL native bus compressor. Let's pull that up, and I'm going to solo this, and we're just going to dial in a nice parallel compressed signal. So going back, this is where we create some perceived loudness, not just loudness. So you're going to see when I mix this in that we're going to get a much higher perceived loudness with this parallel compressed signal coming through. So I'm just going to dial this in really quickly. Oops. Need to send some down here, don't we?
Faith don't leave, 'cause that's priceless. I confide it, uninvited. At times, clouded mind, cold hearts, feeling lost, but you had me from the start. Oh yeah, I cannot live for myself. Traveling alone, no help. Try hard to impress all the pretty ones, having fun on the surface, but what the word is. I need your attention. I had to learn how to listen. I only pray when convenient. How could I be so conceited? Trust when you let me roam, knowing that I'll find my way back home.
All right, so what am I listening for here? I'm just listening for a very glued signature kind of SSL bus comp sound. We just want something pretty consistent here. So I kind of peg the needle, right here above 8. And then we're going to mix that in to the mix here.
Traveling alone, no help. Try hard to impress all the pretty ones, having fun on the surface, but what the word is. I need your attention. I had to learn how to listen. I only pray when convenient.
So as soon as I turn that on, you can just hear the impact of what's going on there. But let's move on to maybe some ozone processing. You know what I need to do, though? That would be smart. Sorry, I got into... yeah, we need to put this on the stereo bus. That's going to be a smarter decision here. But now, let's throw on ozone. Let me go into ozone 9. We're not going to do Master Assistant, although it is very useful. We're not going to do that today. We're going to do it ourselves. So what I'm going to do on the maximizer is I'm just going to park this at -1. So this is one thing we talked about loudness in terms of standards. Safe bet is to set your ceiling to -1 true peak, just because when we do have this conversion over to MP3 or any kind of lossless format, it's going to be affected in that way. So you want to have a little bit of headroom. But I'm going to put it at 0, and we're just going to park it. I'm going to go to transient. We'll dial in the character a little bit. Just going to leave this. This is the last thing that we're going to do to really achieve the loudness. But I'll put that there. We got some questions. Sorry, guys. I got into the process. I'm trying to be speedy with this master here. Yeah, okay. Kaiser's got the black box design H2 Pro Q3, C4 waves, L2 waves, Pro L2. Hey, some good plugins there for sure. I have most of those as well. What's up, Ingenious Beats? Hey, I've seen that name before. Yeah, y'all got some good plugins. You got what you need. All right, so we got Ozone open. Let's take this to the next level here. We're going to go ahead and I'm going to load the exciter. Make sure and put all this before your maximizer, right? This should be the last thing. But we're going to, once again, I told you guys we were going to be talking about perceived loudness, right? Well, here we go. So we're going to dial in some bands here. Let's just say from about 500 to 3K. Because I think this track needs some excitement there. And then maybe we'll do one a little higher at like 10K. I don't know if we'll use that, but I definitely want to dial in something for the mid-range. So I'm going to select tape for both of these. Actually, let's do one tape. And then up here, maybe do analog. Let's blend this in.
Cold hearts feeling lost, but you had me from the start, oh yeah. I cannot live for myself. Traveling alone, no help. Try hard to impress all the pretty ones, having fun on the surface, but what the word is.
All right, so without it.
Cold hearts feeling lost, but you had me from the start, oh yeah. I cannot live for.
And with.
Cold hearts feeling lost, but you had me from the start, oh yeah. I cannot live for myself.
I know that's seemingly subtle, right? But big difference so far. So let's keep it with the exciter. And then we might do, trying to think if I want to do some tape, but you know what? We're running out of time here. So let's just go ahead and reach for the maximizer. I think we've got pretty much what we need here. And this is where, okay, this is a great example of what we've been talking about, how much do we want to kind of crank this thing to get the loudness, but retain the dynamics. So I want you to listen very closely while I'm pulling this down, because there's going to be a point that it's not going to serve the track. All right. I'm going to get intense with it, and we'll bring it back in. We'll rein it back in. All right. So here we go.
Cold hearts feeling lost, but you had me from the start, oh yeah. I cannot live for myself. Traveling alone, no help. Try hard to impress all the pretty ones, having fun on the surface, but what the word is. I need your attention. I had to learn how to listen.
All right, so at that point, a little bit too much. So I'm gonna back it down here.
But your love is also healing. Cannot replace this feeling. They never will. I try every single day of my life. I could never fill this void. Tuned in constantly to the noise, buying into all the things we don't need. Run from stress and anxiety. This emptiness fills the scene. Going deep to find the meaning. It's real. View is clearing up here while the sun is so near. Trust when you let me roam, knowing that I'll find my way back home.
All right, so what do y'all think? I think we did pretty good in like 10 minutes. Now, I do want to preface that is a very abbreviated process, right? So mastering is not generally going to happen that quickly. But I think from what we started with, and obviously for those of you who are very picky about gain matching and all that, it's going to sound different. But we did affect perceived loudness with the bus comp, with the excitement, the tape saturation that we did in ozone, you know, a lot of things that are going to bring up that perceived loudness. So what we started with.
But your love is also healing, cannot replace this feeling, they never will. I try every single day of my life, I could never fill this void, tuned in constantly to.
And what we got here.
But your love is also healing, cannot replace this feeling, they never will. I try every single day of my life, I could never fill this void, tuned in constantly to the noise, buying into all the things we don't need.
Yeah, XX, I can promise you that most, and I'm not saying that, you know, you should do what you feel comfortable with, but most people, top 40, most engineers are not delivering at -1. I'll just tell you that much. There's a lot of clipping. If you turn off your, you know, loudness normalization and all that stuff, most tracks are going to be clipping at that point with the conversion. I'm not saying that that's the correct way. I'm just saying it's more important to just get the sound that you want, get the, you know, the perceived loudness down, because that, you know, sort of normalization is going to happen regardless. So, yeah, but I know what you mean. If you want to be a little safer with it, that's cool. Thoughts on mixing with headphones and earphones? I think nowadays more than ever, it's absolutely possible. And you know, for a while I was really skeptical about it, just because I started mixing with monitors and really got into mixing and mastering with all of my clients on monitors in, you know, somewhat treated rooms. So I got used to it, but the more I've been utilizing headphones, it's totally possible. And, you know, anything with mixing and mastering is all about learning your speakers. It's not about necessarily the environment, or the speakers, how nice your speakers and your acoustic environment are. It's just knowing it, you know. And if you've used the same set of headphones for a while, it's very, very possible to get the results you want. So yeah, for sure. All right, y'all. So we jumped through mastering very quickly there at the end. But I do want to just reiterate that mastering is about making seemingly small and subtle decisions, but just doing what's right for the song. You know, a lot of times you'll get something that may need a lot of work. A lot of times you may just get something from a client that you just need to work on the EQ, you know, just kind of dial in tonally and hit a limiter a little bit just to get it to the loudness you want, and that's it. So it's just about knowing what to do, what not to do. Are there any final questions in the chat? Yeah, what's up, Ingenious Beats? Any final questions? So just to reiterate, ADSR is streaming daily, so check out their socials for the full schedule. And also, I just want to give a big shout out to everybody who's been here with me. This has been a lot of fun. I hope you picked up something that's going to be helpful for you in your mastering process. I know we did this very quickly, but again, I hope there was something there that you guys can pick up on it. And I want to give a big shout out to everybody who submitted to get feedback. I know that takes courage. And, you know, again, hopefully just with my feedback and what was in the chat, it's going to give you some stuff to take it to the next level. Yeah. So shout out to everybody. Thank you once again. If you weren't able to submit, head over to the ADSR Discord channel to get in for the next stream. And if you're looking for some additional mixing and mastering production tutorials, I also have a YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/Sean Devine. You can check me out there. Check out the ADSR channel. Hit that subscribe button. If you're making music, you want to get better with this stuff in every way, which we all do, including myself, head over, subscribe to the ADSR channel, follow them on Facebook and all the different platforms, and definitely join the Discord server for future streams. Really enjoyed it, y'all. Much love to y'all. We'll talk to you soon.